First of all, the definition of a wild instrument is one in which none of the parties have ever had a record interest. This title standard says that the title under a wild instrument is not unmarketable in some of these cases shown here. First, you might assume, well, obviously somebody who didn't own property can't convey it or mortgage it anyway. But the thing you have to keep in mind is that if there was an unrecorded instrument, maybe a probate or something else that changed the title that you haven't found in your chain, then you don't want to completely ignore a wild instrument. Well, this standard says that the title is not unmarketable if it can be shown from the record that it was a mistake and it was intended to describe other property. Now, that second note, number 2 there, we don't rely on very often. That's part of the standard, but be very careful. You don't want to rely on that without talking to underwriting. But item 1 there, we rely on all the time. So if it can be shown in the record that it was a mistake, then that defect can be cleared from the title. Well, let's give you an example of how this might happen. Okay, our property's lot 4, and our owner's Bill Smith. Well, John Doe happens to own the property down the street a ways, lot 14, and this is not our property. Well, John Doe goes out, makes a mortgage to ABC Mortgage, and they make a mistake on the mortgage, and they call it lot 4. Well, that is a wild mortgage. And obviously, John Doe never had title to our lot 4, so it's a wild mortgage. So how do we clear this from the record in this example? Well, first of all, if the error was discovered already and a corrective mortgage was recorded, then there's already evidence in the record that this mortgage was a mistake and nothing further is required. Just keep in mind that you wouldn't find that corrective mortgage running lot 4. You'd find the corrective mortgage running lot 14. So if you're running a geographic index, you have to actually run the title of the other owner to see if a correction has been made. If no correction was made, then an affidavit from a knowledgeable person, maybe the lender, maybe the attorney, maybe the title company who drew the mortgage, has knowledge of the facts, could give an affidavit stating that this was an error. It was intended to be lot 14 and not lot 4. And you could clear the defect with that affidavit. Okay, now changing gears again briefly, a word about foreclosure actions and reformation suits. We don't do as many foreclosures anymore, but we're still doing some. And occasionally in a mortgage foreclosure, you will find that either the mortgage has an inadequate legal description. Let's start with that case. Let's say the mortgage has a defective legal, but the borrower's title was good. Then a count for reformation could be added to the complaint to have the final judgment determine that the mortgage is reformed to the correct description. And when the judgment is issued, it will contain a statement to that effect. Once that is done, then at that point forward, the mortgage becomes good and could be foreclosed. Now, or if, let's say, our mortgage instrument was good, but our borrower's deed was defective, maybe his seller had good title, but when he conveyed to our borrower there was a defect, a count could be added to the complaint to reform the deed in that case. But in that case, you have to add the person who signed the deed as a defendant. So you have another party defendant that has to be added there. And also a couple of things to be careful about with reformation actions is that a reformation is an action in personam. That means it's an action against the person who signed it, not the land itself. So therefore, constructive service of process is not permitted. You have to have personal service on the person who signed it. Also, there's a 20-year statute of limitation in 95.231. So if the deed's more than 20 years old, you generally can't reform it. Or if it's a gift deed, it cannot be reformed. The concept of a reformation is that the buyer paid his money, he fulfilled his part of the bargain, but the seller didn't deliver, so it can be reformed. Well, in a gift deed, there is no bargain and no money paid. The grantor just says, whatever I have, you have, and that's it. So you generally can't reform the deed if it's a gift deed. Where reformation is not permitted, then sometimes a quiet title suit may be necessary.
All
that
right.
concludes it.
That's great. We got a couple of questions, Jerry. I thought we would answer since we've got about a minute left. One of them has to do back when we talked about Scrivener's affidavits. And the question was, what if the OR book and page was also incorrect? Would a Scrivener's affidavit still work?
If the OR book and page of what was incorrect?
Probably the recorded instrument, probably a deed, I'm thinking.
Well, I'm guessing that question is maybe where they've used an OR book and page as a legal description. Yeah. In that case, you would not consider that an adequate description because if they're going to give a book and page, which consists of two little bits of data, you'd think they could get it right. If they don't have the correct book and page, it's normally not correct. However, let me clarify that a little bit. If maybe one digit of the page number is off, or perhaps that the instrument is a 4-page instrument and they identify the second page of the instrument, then it is perhaps close enough to rely upon. So in that case, we may have to look at it on a case-by-case basis and determine whether that book and page is clear enough to rely upon.
All right, great. All right, I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you.